This year, AI started getting pretty useful if you're a software developer, and it's fair to say that over the last couple of months, things have gone pretty crazy with the release of Bolt, Vercel's improved V0, and in November, we also saw a brand new editor launch called Windsurf. Yes, it's another VS Code fork, but maybe this is the one. So let's talk about them. First, I'll just take you through how each of them works one by one, and then we'll try and build a simple full-stack app together using all three tools. Okay, so let's start with V0. V0 was announced by Vercel around October 2023, but it's only really been widely available from earlier this year. On the surface of it, V0 looks like a very familiar chat UI like you might see on ChatGPT or Claude, but the main point of difference is Vercel's optimized the code generation to generate Next.js-based front-end apps. It also uses another Vercel acquisition as of last year called ShadCN UI as the main UI components. So it's kind of like a really easy and quick way to generate a modern, clean-looking front-end app that uses up-to-date components, has good accessibility, and just generally looks clean and sleek. The beauty of V0 is really that, in addition to just a chat UI, it lets you preview what it's just generated. So once you've asked it to generate something for you, on the right-hand side, you'll be able to preview the page as if you're developing locally on a React app. Also really cool is you can actually drop a design or an image of another website and ask V0 to kind of replicate it or generate something similar for you. And that can be super useful. Like if you've just designed something in Figma and you want to convert it into a React app, well, probably the quickest way to do it is to export an image, put it into V0, and then you've got your Next.js app that replicates your Figma design. Okay, so a couple more things to mention about V0 is they've made it really easy to install what's been generated into an app that you're actually working on locally. You just run a single command using the ShadCN CLI, so npx shadcn add, and then V0 will generate this unique URL. When you run that command locally in your terminal, that will pull in all the code that's been generated, and you can just start working on it like a normal app. A couple of weeks ago, Vercel also updated V0 to let you deploy directly to Vercel. Now, I imagine this is a reaction to Bolt, which we'll talk about next, because Bolt lets you kind of build more full stack apps directly within the UI. And V0 is much more about like building a single landing page or something like that. So I don't actually know who would deploy what they generated with V0 directly to Vercel, but they've added it, so maybe some people will actually use it. We'll see. Next up we have Bolt. Bolt is newer than V0. I think it was released maybe a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, but I certainly came across it about a month ago. Immediately it was clear that this is a step above what we've seen before. Bolt is the first sort of really useful AI agent or AI software developer, as opposed to just a chatbot that generates some code. Bolt was made by a company called Stackblitz, and their main line of business is letting you write and run front-end code directly in the browser. So Bolt is quite a natural fit where they wrote this AI agent as an extension to the platform that they already had. And so the way Bolt works and some of the advantages it has over V0 is once you've asked it to build something, you've actually got this agent UI on the left. Depending on what you've asked, it might be working across multiple files. It might be running some npm commands to install the right libraries. And yeah, it's like it manages to break down your prompt into multiple smaller steps, telling you what's happening in the process. So yeah, definitely first glimpses into the future of software development with Bolt. And finally, Windsurf. Windsurf is a new editor that came out around mid-November, and it's actually the first agent-like AI that I've been able to use in real production apps, including my day-to-day job. Windsurf is just a VS Code fork, just like Cursor and some other editors that are coming out these days, but it combines VS Code with something that we saw in Bolt, which is an agent-like AI that can break down larger problems into small ones and execute them across real code bases. So it can make changes towards an objective like implementing a particular feature. I've seen the agent run for actually minutes at a time, searching through files, understanding how to change the file based on the file's contents, and it has this like running thought process that it tells you what it's trying to do and what it's thinking about. It's really kind of interesting to watch. It's a bit like having a junior developer sit right next to you and you just kind of tell them what you want, and they'll go through and figure out what to do. And Windsurf can even suggest terminal commands to run, for example, to generate types or database migrations as a result of the things it's changing. So it can really do the whole process of software development almost by itself. It does need supervision, it's not perfect, and I've definitely seen it make the wrong changes, or I've actually seen it hallucinate a couple of times. So you have to be vigilant and you have to check through all the work that Windsurf is doing. But this is really the first time I've seen maybe a shift in how we could develop software just in the next few years. I've honestly been so impressed with Windsurf that I'm using it day to day in replacement of Cursor, which is my daily driver before this. I have no doubt that Cursor is probably going to gain some of this functionality pretty soon as well, and I really hope that the best editor wins. Cool, so now that we've covered these three tools and how they work in more detail, you might be wondering, how can you use them in a real workflow to actually help speed you up as a developer? So in this part of the video, let's try and build a sample app together, and I'll show you where each of these tools excels, and we'll go start to finish with a really quick first iteration on an app that could be a real product. So what I want to build with you is an idea I had recently, which is to try and speed up how quickly you can find a domain name for a new startup. So let's first start by visiting V0, and we're going to ask it for a landing page for our new idea. I'm going to type in a prompt saying, come up with a landing page for the following startup idea. We let you type in your startup idea, and we'll find the best name and domain name combination that is available and at a reasonable price. Okay, I've pressed enter, so let's see what V0 comes up with. So it's generating the code, and you can see the code that's coming up. It's always going to be a Next.js app. That's how V0 kind of works. And this preview kind of encapsulates everything that V0 is about. We have this very vanilla, plain style. It uses ShadCN UI components, which are also owned by Vercel now. So you kind of know what you're getting with V0. You're going to get a reasonable looking, modern, clean landing page. Let's see if we like it. So it's called it name your startup in seconds, type your idea, get the perfect name and domain. That seems good to me. We have some potentially questionable text contrast here and some alignment issues, but it's not too bad. We've got a how it works section, and then we have a simple pricing. Interesting how it came up with those prices. And these buttons at the top don't work, so we'll have to fix that at some point. Now we can actually ask V0 to correct some of these mistakes. So let's see what it does if I ask it to fix the how it works and pricing sections. Okay, so I actually don't know what it did here, but it didn't seem to fix this issue at all. So maybe let's leave V0 there, and let's also ask Bolt to see if it might come up with something better looking. Okay, I'm loading up Bolt. I'll paste in the same prompt from V0. And I'm also just going to add that it should use Next.js as much as possible. Right away, you kind of see the difference between V0 and Bolt. In Bolt, you have kind of a full project in front of you rather than just a single file. And you can see it's pulled in a lot of components here in a component library, which we can use later on if we want. And now it's coming up with our landing page. So let's see what it's generated. Cool, so we have turn your startup idea into a perfect domain. Nice. We do have like a slight layout issue, same as V0. It's not perfect, but it actually looks quite presentable, and I would say probably looks slightly better than V0. Okay, let's download the Bolt version. I think it looks quite nice. I like the gradient it's added to the text, and in general, I think it's just slightly more modern looking. So we click download here, and hopefully in a few seconds, we'll have the zip file. Now I have the dev server open in my browser, and the code open in Windsurf. So now let's have some fun. Let's ask Windsurf to implement some of the actual functionality we're going to need for this website. Right, so I'm not going to write any code myself. I'm just going to go to Cascade, which is Windsurf's AI agent, and let's start prompting. Let's say, here we have a skeleton Next.js app for helping people name their startup and find a matching available domain name. Help me implement the first part of this functionality. Let's have a text box on the front page where someone can type in their idea, and a form that submits when you press name my startup, it makes an API call to our backend. Okay. So pretty generic prompt, but let's see. This is what Windsurf does really well. It analyzes the project you're in, it looks at the right files, and it kind of figures out a path forward. It's not always the right path forward, but I've seen it succeed in making changes to really large projects fairly effectively. And you can kind of see what it's doing to each file by going open diff. Here, it's made some changes to add a submit function to our hero component. Right, so we've got this API/generate name, and it's also calling the handle submit function, which is nice. And then we've also got this root.ts inside generate name. And this now has some mock name generator, which we will ask in a second to try and implement properly. So now let's go to the actual page and see what it's done. We've got this enter your startup idea field and find name. Now the first thing I want to do is I want the enter your startup idea field to be a text area so you can enter maybe a few sentences. Can we make the input field a text area so people can add their elevator pitch before we name their startup? Another great thing you can see here is it's found an existing text area component, which Bolt, I think, pulled in from ShadCN UI. So Windsurf realized that we already have a text area component. It doesn't need to create a new one or use the built-in HTML component. It can just use the component it's found. Now let's go into the input with button component and see what Windsurf has done. Right, so we have our text area, we have a submit button, and the placeholders also changed. Okay, so let's accept Windsurf's changes. So let's now ask Windsurf to use the domainer API to check for actual domain names. So instead of returning this mock response, let's implement the actual business logic using domainer. Okay, so we have a pretty realistic looking implementation now. I don't know if it will actually work. This looks pretty similar to what I would expect. So the next thing we have to implement is to actually generate some name ideas. So let's ask for that as well. So we've already got something that's kind of functional. So let's just give it a try. Obviously, we don't have the right API keys yet. I want to see if the flow itself seems to do something. All right, let's get self-referential here. I'm going to type in the startup idea that we're trying to build right now and see what the domains it comes up with. All right, so let's go name my startup and let's see what happens. Okay, so we just have a 500 error, which is kind of what we expected. We don't really have any API key set up yet. I just added the domainer and OpenAI API keys to the project, so hopefully this time around it starts to work when we press the submit button. Okay, so moment of truth, let's try this all out and see what happens. Yes, the loading state is working, and wow, that was pretty quick. Like, for a few minutes of work with just AI generated code, this is very impressive. And we have potentially a domain name that could make sense for this startup, which is idea name with the .me domain. So just to give this a final try, let's try a different startup idea. So I'm going to go to Windsurf's website and copy their tagline and their elevator pitch. Let's see what our name generator comes up with. Okay, this is pretty interesting. We have some reasonable sounding names here. I love how it's come up with the co.de domain, which I'm assuming is a German domain, to separate out code, which is really interesting. And that's it for this video. It's really remarkable how much these new tools reduce the barrier to entry to building a new app or a startup from scratch. With just a few minutes of effort, we've really managed to make something that would have taken 10 times as long without any AI involvement. If you enjoyed this video, please do drop me a like, and if you'd like to see more content like this in the future, then also don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.